Imagine a man whose sketches map the flight of birds, whose painted faces seem to breathe, whose notebooks sketch machines that haven't yet flown. Leonardo da Vinci, inventor, anatomist, painter, folded science and poetry into a single restless mind. We know him by a smile that won't stop puzzling the world, by a supper frozen like a heartbeat, by a circle and square drawing that still measures the human ideal. Today, we'll walk through the life and work of Leonardo. The Mona Lisa, the quiet enigma, The Last Supper, a drama in fresco, the Vitruvian Man, geometry of the body, Lady with an Ermine, grace and presence, and the Virgin of the Rocks, mysterious light. Each image is a doorway into an artist who refused tidy categories: painter one day, engineer the next, anatomist the evening after that. In the next 8.5 minutes, expect facts, curiosities, and a few poems of description. Expect to meet unfinished works, mirror writing notebooks, and the long shadow Leonardo cast across art and science. Leonardo was born in 1452 in the Tuscan town of Vinci, the illegitimate son of Ser Piero, a notary, and a woman named Caterina. That small origin, a child of countryside and town, matters. Early eyes tuned to landscapes, to the way light slips across hills and water. Florence was near enough that the young Leonardo absorbed the city's craft culture, but his childhood included the rhythms of fields and animals, an apprenticeship of the senses more than of schools. At about 14, he entered the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, where apprentices learned by doing, grinding pigments, stretching panels, copying masters. Here, Leonardo's astonishing curiosity found tools. A likely self-portrait, the bearded image often linked to him, shows a man who seems to be looking at both the world and an idea, a suitable emblem for a life split between observation and invention. In Verrocchio's studio, Leonardo learned the craft of painting, how to prepare a panel, how to mix egg tempera and oils, how to render a face from 3 lines. He absorbed lessons not as rules, but as experiments. One of his earliest large commissions, The Adoration of the Magi, remained unfinished, but it reveals the restless experimentation, complex crowd scenes, fractured perspectives, a taste for psychological drama. He also produced delicate studies, hands, arms, faces, that functioned like rehearsals for feeling. These studies are not mere technical practice. They are a way of tuning perception, understanding muscle under skin, weight, and intention. Even in his youth, Leonardo was already circling subjects: how bodies move, how light models form, how a single gesture can tell a story. Leonardo's major works are few, but seismic. The Mona Lisa, painted across years beginning around 1503, is a study in subtlety. Her smile is not a trick, but the result of sfumato, a soft, smoky blending of tones that avoids harsh outlines and creates depth of atmosphere. Sfumato is Leonardo's signature technique. The Last Supper, painted 1495 to 1498 for a refectory in Milan, compresses drama into a single horizontal breath. Judas, Peter, John, and Christ arranged in an instant of revelation. The Vitruvian Man is not a painting, but a drawing that marries anatomy and geometry, a human body inscribed in a circle and a square, a visual manifesto about proportion. Lady with an Ermine presents psychological presence, a sitter at once calm and engaged, with an animal that complicates identity and symbolism. The Virgin of the Rocks, in its 2 versions, shows Leonardo's love for dark, mysterious landscapes and his mastery of light to suggest inner life. Each work looks simple at first glance and then opens like a mechanism, revealing layer after layer. Leonardo's path turned with choices and chance. Leaving Florence for Milan around 1482, he entered the service of Ludovico Sforza, who commissioned The Last Supper, a turning point that made him the artist of courts. The 1499 fall of Ludovico and the French invasion scattered Leonardo. He returned to Florence and entered a period of restless movement, producing the Mona Lisa and working on scientific pursuits. Another turning moment was his anatomical work. Permission to dissect the human body, controversial but revelatory, gave him an understanding of structure that fed both drawing and engineering. He kept moving from court to court, from studio to battlefield consultancy, always carrying notebooks that look like the fingerprints of a method: observe, draw, test, revise. Many of his greatest projects remained unfinished, a pattern that has puzzled and fascinated generations. A restless perfectionism that turned even success into another experiment. Leonardo experimented constantly with technique. Sfumato, which I mentioned, dissolves edges so that forms emerge gradually. Imagine smoke smoothing the hard line between light and shadow. Chiaroscuro, the modeling of light and dark to create three-dimensional form, is another tool he used to give figures psychological presence. He mixed media, oils, tempera, ground pigments, and unconventional grounds. This led to brilliant visual effects, but also conservation problems, famously with The Last Supper, which was executed on a preparatory layer rather than true fresco and began flaking within decades. Leonardo's brushwork could be feather light. He built surfaces and glazes, thin translucent layers that enrich color and depth. His drawings, in ink and metal point, are laboratories, cross-sections of muscles, studies of drapery, hydraulic diagrams. These were not mere jottings, but experiments in perception. Each page a hypothesis tested against nature. Several themes recur across Leonardo's art. Nature is never background, it is character. In Virgin of the Rocks and the Benoit's Madonna, geological forms and water become emotional landscapes, mirroring the human drama. Hands are a persistent motif, instruments of thought and action, rendered with obsessive care. Study a hand and you can read intention. Animals appear as symbols and companions, from the Ermine, a symbol of purity and status, to imagined birds in mechanical sketches. The relationship between observers and observed is another leitmotif. His portraits often turn the gaze back, creating dialogues rather than static presentations. Symbolism in Leonardo is sly and intelligent. An animal so placed may suggest virtue, a gesture may carry narrative weight, and landscape may hold psychological resonance. He returned to these motifs because they were ways of thinking, not mere decoration, but devices for meaning. During his life, Leonardo was both celebrated and misunderstood. Courts coveted his ability to design spectacles and devices as much as portraits, and some patrons impatiently protested delays. Posthumously, controversies multiplied. The Last Supper deteriorated so quickly that critics accused his experimental methods. Restorers and scholars have argued for centuries about what is original. The Mona Lisa's theft in 1911 transformed a masterpiece into a global celebrity and a subject of myth. That he left many works unfinished has fed romantic narratives of a perfectionist genius who could never be satisfied. Attribution debates continue. Which paintings are wholly by Leonardo? Which are studio works? Which are later retouches? Even the familiar bearded portrait thought by some to be Leonardo himself, the so-called possible self-portrait, is disputed. These controversies are part of his afterlife. They keep the conversation alive. Leonardo reshaped what an artist could be. He helped define the high Renaissance ideal, an artist as thinker, scientist, and technician. His anatomical drawings informed both art and medicine. His understanding of proportion, crystallized in the Vitruvian Man, echoed through centuries of design and thought. Painters studied his sfumato and compositional balance. Engineers and inventors study his machines and conceptual diagrams. He fertilized more than painting. Notebooks on hydraulics, optics, and flight seeded later technological imagination. Schools of artists absorbed his combination of observation and invention. Even when he taught few pupils, his methods became a template. The legacy is both concrete, techniques, drawings, lessons, and atmospheric, the idea of the artist as universal intellect. A few curiosities to delight the mind. Leonardo was left-handed and wrote many notes in mirror script. A backward handwriting sometimes explained as habit, sometimes as a privacy measure. He dissected human corpses at a time when the practice was controversial, producing anatomical plates so accurate they still astonish surgeons. He loved birds and famously sketched wings, obsessively studying flight. His designs for flying machines read like poems to wind and feather. He kept meticulous lists, some practical, how many servants, how to buy sheep, some playful, songs to sing, and some prophetic, plans for inventions. He often worked on multiple projects at once, leaving canvases unfinished, which for many years meant fewer completed paintings but a vast record of experimental thought. And a small fact that always charms, he would sometimes test pigments on the backs of his studies, so the margins of notebooks are like palimpsests of color. Leonardo da Vinci resists a tidy summary. He is a confluence of contradictions, a meticulous observer and an incorrigible starter of projects, an artist whose soft touches demand close looking and whose engineering strokes propose futures. To stand before the Mona Lisa or the Last Supper or the quiet, unfinished sweep of the Adoration of the Magi is to meet an intelligence that kept asking how and why. His drawings, the Annunciation studies, the Benoit Madonna, the Adoration sketches, the La Scapigliata's haunting half-finished face, the Vitruvian Man's perfect geometry, are invitations to look closer, to wonder, to experiment. Centuries later, we still open his notebooks, as if they were letters from a friend who invented tomorrow. Leonardo's true portrait is not in a single painting, but in the habit he left behind: relentless curiosity. If you carry one image away, carry the idea that seeing can be a method, a mode of knowing that blends art and science, invention and meditation. That is Leonardo's enduring gift.